rather stated that India would be the second largest economy of the world by the year 2030, ahead of even the US. Now, this growth forecast was pinned on the simple principle that a country's share of world GDP should be in convergence with the country's share of world population. Also, it is said that aging populations across the world of countries will burden their global growth, whereas India, with a young population, will continue to be boosted by consumerism. Also, with India's massive young population will come a massive demand for employment. Let me just stop there. Let the expert do the talking, ladies and gentlemen. How will India look in the year 2030? Well, I hope a land of a billion happy souls. But Mr. Amitabh Kant really is the right man to tell us how India will look in the year 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, with resounding applause, please welcome in our midst Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO, Niti Aayog. Everyone, put your hands together, please. He's a man who can safely rest on his laurels, but he continues on his journey of making stellar contribution, one after the other, to shaping a new India. Sir, a very warm welcome to you at the Credai YouthCon 2019. With him on stage are Mr. Satish Magar and Nimish Arora of Credai. I'm going to begin this session by requesting Mr. Amitabh Kant to please share his thoughts with us on this occasion. Please, sir.
Satish, Nimesh, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here. Actually, Gitambar told me that, before the Prime Minister comes in, we will try and get the Finance Minister to speak. And in case he doesn't turn up, Mr. Kant, can you be a substitute speaker? So, I'm like Einstein. Einstein had won the Nobel Prize and he used to live in United Kingdom. He went around with his driver giving about 300 odd speeches after he won the Nobel Prize, and wherever he used to go, his driver used to accompany him. Then he suddenly got this invitation from the Columbia University, and they went to the USA, and this driver said, Einstein, I've heard you so many times, Mr. Einstein. I've heard you over 300 times. And actually, I can give a better speech than you can ever give. And you give a very flat speech, I'll give a better speech. I know everything that you've said. I've heard you again and again and again. So they went to Columbia University. So Einstein said, okay, you give the speech, I'll sit in the audience. And this driver gave a brilliant speech, flawless speech. It was a perfect speech. It was actually a better speech than Einstein could have ever given. After he finished his speech, the dean said, ladies and gentlemen, now we'll have a question-answer session. And he turned to the most bright, the most brilliant student there, and he said, this young man will ask you a question. He asked him a really difficult, complex, very complicated question. So this driver says, young man, your question is so easy, so simple, that even my driver sitting in the audience can reply. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll speak, but if you have any questions, kindly turn to the Finance Minister of India. So when Gitambar told me this, I had half a mind of saying no to being a substitute speaker. But bureaucrats and ladies never learn when to say no. So I am a civil servant and I promptly agreed. So ladies and gentlemen, India is growing at about 7.5% per annum. But the challenge really for India is to grow at higher rates, of growing at 9 to 10% per annum, year after year, for 3 decades or more. To be able to lift a very young population above the poverty line. And I think it's important to understand that India is the youngest country in the world. 72% of our population is below the age of 32. The average age is 29. And they are very light dependency burden, and rarely has a country not created wealth when it has such a young population. And therefore, Japan, Korea, China all grew at high rates of 9 to 10% for very long periods of time because they had a young population. And in fact, from 46 to 64, 65, UK grew at those rates because of very light dependency burden, because it was passing through a window of demographic transition. And India is passing through that transition, which rarely happens in history. And therefore, India needs to grow at those rates. Our ambition and our hunger must be to grow at rates of 9 to 10% for 3 decades or more. And if you use the compounding power of growth, if you were to grow at those rates, you will overtake China. And therefore, that is really the challenge for India. But what is it that India needs to do to grow at those rates of 9 to 10% over a 3-decade period? I think first and foremost, we must realize that all of us in India, all of us together had made India a very complex, a very complicated, and a very difficult place for private sector to do business and to create wealth. And therefore, in the last 4 years, this government has focused on making India easy and simple. We've scrapped a number of rules, regulation, procedures. Close to 1,300 laws have been scrapped. We've tried to make India digital so that departments could speak to each other, done away with a lot of paperwork. And therefore, India has jumped up 65 positions in the World Bank Ease of Doing Business. No country of this size and scale has been able to jump up 65 positions in a period of 3 years, which India has done. And this is a notable, to my mind, quite a notable achievement. But India is a very large country, and many of you have come from different parts of India. So India is bigger than 24 countries of Europe. And therefore, it's important that we make the states easy and simple. And one of the things we've done is to make states compete on ease of doing business. The first year we did this, Gujarat came number 1. The next year, Andhra came number 1, and the third year, Telangana beat both Andhra and Gujarat. But the good thing was that the eastern part of India, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, came 4th and 5th, and they jumped up huge positions. And therefore, my belief is that if the wealthier part of India, mineral-rich states of India start doing well and they become easy and simple, then India will jump up, make a quantum jump forward. And therefore, this competition among states, naming and shaming states and ranking states and putting that ranking in public domain, to my mind, is critical. So that people must vote for those who perform. And I think that is what we've done. From ease of doing business to water management to health to education, we are ranking states and putting out in public domain. And as more and more people get into the middle class, they will vote for performance rather than for caste or class, and that is important. So first thing we've done is to make India easy and simple. The second is that we've opened up, at a point of time when the world is talking about protectionism, and a lot of protectionism is going across all over the world, from Donald Trump to China, their retaliatory measures. We opened up our foreign direct investment regime. And actually, we opened it up for the real estate sector also in a very big way, so that all of you could have infusion of foreign equity. And if you look at the FDI, in India, in the last 4 years, India's foreign direct investment has grown by about 65% at a point of time when FDI across the world has fallen by 16%. So we've become a more open economy. We've opened up FDI regime across the world, and we've seen the benefits of that because foreign direct investment has benefited India. The third is The third point I want to make is that in the years to come, India will urbanize very rapidly. You know, if you go by the latest McKinsey report, close to 700 million Indians will get into the process of urbanization. 700 million Indians means that the challenge for India is to create 2.5 Americas. As I speak here today, every minute there are 30 Indians who are moving from rural areas to urban areas. And therefore, the process of urbanization has ended across America. It's ended across Europe. It's nearing its completion in China. But in India, the process of urbanization has just begun. And we will do more urbanization in the next 5 decades. In the next 50 years, we'll do more urbanization than what we've done in the last 5,000 years. We will do more construction, and therefore the challenge for all of us, as we do this large-scale construction, is that we do it in a very innovative and sustainable manner. When America urbanized, land, gas, water were all cheaply available. Because they were cheaply available, America had the luxury of creating cities like Atlanta, where 99% of the people travel by car. Nobody cycles, nobody walks, nobody goes by public transportation. This luxury of gas, water, land is not available in India anymore. And therefore, India will have to do very compact, very dense, a very recyclable urbanization. And many of these lessons don't come from the western part of the world, they come from the eastern part of the world. They come from Singapore, where every drop of water is recycled. Every single drop of water is recycled. Since they were running out of treaty with Malaysia in the 60s, they took it as a challenge, and almost 15% of the water is recycled for human consumption. That is the level of sophistication they've taken it up. So the Prime Minister and President of Singapore actually drinks recycled water. They come from a city like Yokohama, where a lady mayor was able to do household segregation of waste and was able to reduce waste by almost 40%, and bring down the cost by almost $13 billion by sheer waste reduction. So they come from a city called Kitakyushu in Japan, where post-industrialization of Japan became one of the most advanced cities with cement and steel plants, etc. But the women of Kitakyushu rose in revolt, and Ministry of Trade and Industry, Meitei of Japan, which was a very powerful industry, worked in partnership with the ladies, with the housewives of Kitakyushu, and everything is recycled in Kitakyushu. So if you go there, everything is recyclable. And they come from Curitiba, where buses are available within 3 minutes of walking for every citizen. And therefore, many of these challenges of India can be learned from the lessons of these cities, that how do we create, how do we do innovative and sustainable urbanization. And that is a challenge for all of you members of Credai, that whatever you do, do it in an innovative and sustainable manner, because your urbanization will be for the next 5 decades. If you don't believe in that, please don't ruin India. But it's important that we have a commitment to Paris, for the climate goals, and therefore it's important that we make India very innovative and sustainable, because as it is, we have the 14 of the 15 worst polluting cities in India. And this is critical. The fourth point I want to make is that we are seeing a lot of young people in India doing amazing work. And since this is a youth icon, even in Credai, you will see a lot of young people doing better than the previous generation, and they will out-excel the previous generation. They will do much, much better. I mean, I deal with the startup movement in India, and I come across some amazing people. You know, there's close to 19,000 startups in India, and they are doing some of the biggest disruptions in India. I mean, look at a young girl called Pranshu Bhandari, who's taught in 1 year. She started with Mandarin and Japanese and realized that that's not the demand, and has taught She started with an app called Hello English and has taught 9 million Indians how to speak English. 9 million Indians. No school or college has done that. Or look at another girl called Aditi, who through her artificial intelligence startup called Imbibe actually tracks every single student. Every single student. And those who fail behind is able to give additional classes simply because of the use of technology. You had Vijay here, who's an amazing story of Paytm, but you look at Baiju. I mean, Baiju is where Mark Zuckerberg has invested his personal money and has gone in to become a major unicorn all over. Or look at Oyo. I mean, Oyo has more rooms than what Taj, Oberoi, and ITC put together have done in the last 120 years. This boy has done in 4 years' time. Inventory of rooms is more than all three big chains. Or look at Ola, which is penetrating global markets now. Australia, UK, many markets. And therefore, the future is about these young people disrupting India, and there's a tremendous energy, vibrancy, and dynamism amongst the young people of India. And I think the senior generation of Credai must pass on the baton to the younger generation to take Credai movement forward. The fifth point I want to make is that it's important to understand that we are going through very major structural reforms in this country. Huge structural reforms are being undertaken in this country. Making one tax across the country, cutting across 17 taxes, it's like making one tax across Europe. So the GST was about one tax across the country. It replaces 17 tax and has done away with long queues at state boundaries and has made India a far more efficient economy. Secondly, look at the insolvency and bankruptcy code. It's a major structural reform. And it's important to say that because earlier, many businesses in India used to get away by not paying debt to banks. You can't do this anymore. You know, the days of crony capitalism are over. If you don't pay, you lose your businesses. I mean, that's what's happened in the case of SR Steel. That's happened in the case of SR Oil. So it's important that there is discipline and that there is commitment to repay back to the financial institutions, and that's what Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has done. And thirdly, you are all aware of RERA. I mean, RERA has happened simply because many middle-class people and lower middle-class people, people like me, who booked for houses, never got those houses. And therefore, there was a need to bring in a certain level of discipline amongst the builders of India. And I'm sure all of you would realize that that discipline must be maintained so that people who book for houses get their houses. And this is critical for India. And therefore, these are major structural reforms which have been carried out. No other government could have done this. But these are far-reaching structural reforms, and they will cause teething problems. And many of you would be going through teething problems. But let me assure you that 3 years down the line, this will give a major fillip to India's growth story. All of you will be on a high, and all of you will be witnessing double-digit growth because you're going through the pain of all this now. And it's important to go through this so that you can sustain a 3-decade growth over a long period of time, and that there is discipline in the system. It's important. The sixth point I want to make is that we are in the midst of one of the biggest technological disruptions that is taking place across the world. You know, India is the only country which has 1 billion biometric, is the only country with 1 billion mobile, and is the only country with 1 billion bank accounts. No other country in the world has 1 billion biometric, 1 billion mobile, and 1 billion saving account. We are the biggest consumer of data. Our data consumption is more than the data consumption of China and USA put together. And therefore, the rate at which mobile data consumption has fallen in the last 2 years has fallen by 23 times the data consumption rates. And the rate at which the cost of smartphones is falling in the next 3 years, I envisage that every Indian will have a smartphone and he'll be handling with smartphone. And therefore, people like me, for digital payments, I have not used my debit card, credit card, my ATM machine for the last 1 year. I've only used my mobile telephone. And therefore, we brought in this unified payment interface, UPI, which led to Bheem, which led to many people like Paytm, Google Pay, many of them innovating. And therefore, we are in the midst of one of the biggest technological disruptions simply because of digitization. In India, 98.6% people pay income tax digitally. 95% of those settlements are done within a period of 6 months, all digitally, all online. No other country does this with income tax. The GST is paperless, cashless. You look at the new Ayushman Bharat scheme, which is about linking 150,000 primary healthcare centers to the district hospital digitally, so that people living in villages can be provided medical care digitally by expert doctors, and the health insurance scheme, which covers 500 million Indians. 500 million Indians are being insured under the Ayushman Bharat scheme, which is more than the population of USA, Europe, and Mexico put together. And it's totally cashless, portable, totally digital, paperless, cashless, portable. So what we are witnessing is the biggest digitization that has ever taken place anywhere else in the world. So digitization, technological transformation is the key. The last point I want to make is that we are seeing a lot of technological innovations in India, and a lot of that is happening for the world. We have close to 1,200 multinational corporations in India who are doing technology innovation for the world. So GE, Philips, IBM, Cisco, all of them are here, and they're doing technological innovation for the rest of the world. So GE's low-cost sound recording machine, or the ECG machine, or John Deere's 60 HP tractor, all getting innovated in India, and they are being done at price points which the world has never seen before. At GE's low-cost cardiography machine was actually invented. They used to do this in America for $35,000. It was done in India for $3,500. It enabled GE to do an ECG for $1 instead of $35. So frugal innovation India has done. But there are several challenges, and one of those challenges is, to my mind, while I've spoken about India, there are several challenges, and one of those challenges is that we should be able to do innovation at very low price points. The Ministry of Urban Development has done this housing challenge. We take too long a period to construct house. We take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Similar kind of construction can be done across the world in about 8 months to 10 months, because the rate of interest in India are high. So you need to squeeze the period of construction in India. And if you don't do that innovation, it'll be very difficult for you to survive. It'll just not be possible for Indians to have housing if you are not able to squeeze the period of construction. And that would require a lot of technological innovations in your process of construction. And therefore, my request to all of you is to get a lot of innovation into your technology and get a lot of good quality practices inbuilt into you. The second key thing is that it'll be very difficult for India to grow at high rates without all parts of India developing. What we see is the south and the western part of India developing. The eastern part of India is not developing that rapidly. And therefore, one of the key things we are doing is to do an aspirational district program where every part of India develops. And 115 districts of India is an aspirational program led by the Prime Minister of India, where we have 49 indicators which we are driving to ensure that education, health, nutrition, we keep them on par with all the states of India. And we are seeing some rapid progress in these states. The third is that it'll be very difficult for India to develop on a long period of time if we are not able to do technological and market interventions in the agriculture sector. You know, growth is important. While distributive equity is important, growth is important. You can't do distributive equity till India doesn't grow at 9 to 10%. And therefore, this requires us to do a lot of reforms in the agriculture sector. The first green revolution was brought in by technology, and therefore we need to bring in technology. We need to do a lot of market reforms, and we need to push for growth. And the fourth point I want to make is that the biggest challenge for India is the challenge of gender parity. That In India, only 24% of the women work. Rest of the world is 48%. And if India was to bring it down up to 48%, we'll add $700 billion to India's economy. And therefore, it's incumbent upon all of you builders, all of you Credai members to ensure that the leadership of the next generation goes to your daughters more than to your boys. You know, it's important that men consciously give leadership position to women. And that is what the essence of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao is all about. That women take leadership position. And unless men consciously don't push for it, it'll be difficult for women to rise up in India's society. Wherever we've given equal opportunity, women have outcompeted men in every single competitive exam, and therefore it's incumbent upon us to push for women. And I can assure you that women as CEOs of construction company will do much better than men as CEOs of construction company. I have no doubt in my mind. And therefore it's a huge opportunity for all of you, but it's a huge responsibility for all of you to push for women rather than men. So ladies and gentlemen, I've given you what are the pluses of India, what are the challenges of India. Let me just conclude, and I'll open myself to question answers. Let me just conclude by saying, by turning to this 14th century Indian poet, he was a Muslim. He wrote in the Persian language. His ancestry was Turkish. 14th century Indian, Muslim, writing in Persian, ancestry was Turkish. And he counted himself to be the luckiest man alive to have been born in India and to have India as his motherland. And of the 14th century India, he said how exhilarating is the atmosphere of India. There cannot be a better teacher than the way of life of its people. If any foreigner comes by, he'll have to ask for nothing because Indians teach him how to smile like a flower and make him as their own. So, ladies and gentlemen, India is passing through very exhilarating period. These are very exciting periods of growth and prosperity. These kind of technological innovations, these kind of growth has never happened in India before. These kind of structural reforms have also not happened before. And all of you must learn to smile like a flower and take advantage of this whole movement of growth and prosperity of India and make India grow at 9 to 10% for the next 3 decades. It's important to think just beyond your business and look at the larger perspective of India and become a partner in this whole growth and development process of India. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be very happy to respond to any queries that you may have.
We have time for questions, or so in the last 20 years? Yeah, okay, fine. 3 questions, 4 questions. So in the last 20 years, we have seen a lot of shift from rural to urban, and then coming 20 years also is going to see a more faster shift. There's a huge deficiency of infrastructure, and huge amount of funding is required. Everyone expects the government to do, the government expects the private sector to do. So what would be the right share of both of them to contribute to make India the India we want to be?
I just want to make a couple of points on this issue about funding. And I think it's important to say that firstly, banks in India historically have been undercapitalized. And therefore we needed to capitalize them. And then they ran into this huge problem of NPAs, which you are all aware of, and the government has now capitalized them. And in the meantime, this process of lending to many of you and for many consumer goods services was taken over by the NBFCs. And then, for actually in the last 4 to 5 years, the NBFCs have done phenomenal work of lending to many sectors of the economy, and actually economy has grown because of the NBFCs, and many NBFCs have actually become bigger than the banks. But when we ran into this crisis of ILFS, it was very important to ensure that we don't have any other issue so that there is confidence in India's economy, and the government acted very promptly on the ILFS issue. And increasingly what we will see is that the banks will come back. Actually, if you look at the last 3 months, the total lending from the banks has increased, and over a period of time you will see doing banks, lending will increase to all sectors of the economy, but you will also have the NBFCs playing a very critical and major role. So both, I just wanted to dwell on some issues which Credai has been raising and for which Niti had been fighting a lot, and I just wanted to tell you that we've been fighting the battle of Credai actually for lower GST on under construction properties, and we fought for it, and our view was that all along was that you needed a lower GST for construction companies, and the GST Council has set up this group of ministers, and the group of ministers had to decide between two proposals: lowering GST rate with input tax credit to developers and lowering GST rate to 5% without input tax creditors to developers. And both these options will reduce tax burden on the sector, and the final decision will be taken shortly. So that is one major thing. The second was about, exemption of GST on transfer of development rights for affordable housing. And the GST Council has referred this matter to the group of ministers who will decide the GST rate, and this will also be taken shortly. On the income tax issue, there was this issue about provision regarding levying income tax on notional rental values of unsold properties to be deleted or postponed. This action was taken in the budget for 2019-20, and this has been extended from 1 year to 2 years from the time project is completed, and therefore this will benefit several of your projects. And then there was this issue about long-term capital gain tax waiver extension from 1 residential house to 2 residential houses, which has been done in the budget for 2019-20 and is a big step forward. There was also the issue of Section 80 IBA, which allows 100% of the profit and gains derived from affordable housing projects. So this has also been done in the budget. So many actions have been taken, and this government has been very sympathetic towards Credai and towards the members of Credai, and over-sympathetic. Over-sympathetic, so you better perform and deliver housing now. And whatever more is to be done, we'll be very happy to support Credai in all its endeavors.
So data shows that a lot of houses which are made in India are less than 1 crore of value. So if lowering of GST is very welcome. But if you lower the GST without input credit, the prices will again go up, and then it will deter from the dream of affordable housing.
So we've examined all your recommendations. We've made our own submission to the group of ministers, and you'll have the final decision very shortly. Very shortly.
Sir, one last question before we leave the dais. You have been behind such great ideas like God's Own Country and Incredible India campaign for marketing, tourism in India, both in Kerala and India. अगर आपको वो एक आइडिया देना हो यहाँ पे यूथ विंग को जो रियल एस्टेट इंडस्ट्री का फ्यूचर बदल सकता है, व्हाट वुड दैट बी?
देखिए, मेरे विचार से तो सबसे जरूरी है कि आप टेक्नोलॉजी लाइए अपने सेक्टर में, और ये मेरे विचार से देखिए, हिंदुस्तान कभी कंस्ट्रक्शन क्षेत्र में आगे नहीं बढ़ेगा जब तक कि टेक्नोलॉजी का उपयोग नहीं होगा. आप लोग बहुत ज्यादा समय लेते हैं अपने कंस्ट्रक्शन में. एक घर कोई मिडिल क्लास बुक करता है तो 5-5, 6-6 साल के बाद मिलता है. ये तो दुनिया में कहीं नहीं होता. आपको घर बनाना है तो 8 या 10 महीने के अंदर घर बना के खड़ा करो, और वो जब तक आप नहीं करना सीखोगे टेक्नोलॉजी के उपयोग से, इंटरेस्ट रेट इंडिया में इतना हाई है कि अगर 5 साल का इंटरेस्ट लगा दो तो कभी वायबल ही नहीं होगा. तो आप 8 या 10 महीने, एंड दिस इज एवरी वन ऑफ यू मस्ट लर्न दिस. इफ दुबई कैन डू इट, इफ अमेरिका कैन डू इट, आप सब 10 महीने के अंदर घर बना के खड़ा करिए, और ये टेक्नोलॉजी के बिना नहीं होगा. मेरे ख्याल से बहुत हो गया, अब मेरे ख्याल से बंद करना चाहिए क्योंकि यहाँ काफी प्रिपरेशन चल रही है.
हाँ जी सर.
Thank you, sir, for your presence. Thank you very much. as I had predicted. We've all enjoyed your session as always. I'm going to request Mr. Kapil Gandhi from the Credai Youth Wing to kindly join us on the dais and felicitate you, sir. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together in resounding applause for Mr. Amitabh. Ladies and gentlemen, a very important announcement.